Sorry, I was sitting back there. I couldn't tell. I like to look across. Okay. Good morning. I'm excited to preach on this text because the story of Doubting Thomas is probably one of my favorite stories because it's one that I can really relate to. I don't know about you, if you feel like you can maybe relate to Doubting Thomas. During times of crises, maybe asking the few extra questions it takes to figure it all out. When I was thinking today about the idea of doubt and certainty, which is kind of the juxtaposition of this text, isn't it? There's a doubt in Thomas, and then at the end, there's a proclaimed certainty, isn't there? And there's this juxtaposition back, and I like the word juxtaposition, sorry, a back and forth between certainty and uncertainty, and I think our lives are a lot like that. I love kids. As you know, I have 2 nieces, not by blood, and what my favorite thing about kids is when they're so certain about something so weird. Have you ever seen that? Like they're just so certain about something. I was babysitting my older niece when she was only 3, and they live in Altadena, which is the upper part of Pasadena, and Altadena is a little different than Pasadena. They have a little bit less strict laws about houses and yards, and so there's a lot of farm animals up there. It's kind of like being in the rodeo in Pasadena. So horses are kept up there. You'll hear the occasional goat. It's just awesome. But anyway, so apparently lots of horses go back and forth down their street, right? Their street it's not dirt, it's paved, right? But living in El Segundo near Sepulveda, I just rarely see horses go by my place. Am I the only one? Rarely see horses just walking by, willy-nilly. And we were playing in their front room, and there's a picture window in the front room, and I looked up, and just as a horse was kind of passing by, and I think it was probably being led by someone, but there was no rider on it. And so I looked up, and I said, Corinne, look there's a horse. Where do you think that horse is going? And she said, to find its cowboy. And she was sure. To find its cowboy. And I thought, wow, it must be nice to be. I think she just wanted to get rid of my questions so that she could go on playing, but I love that. Every time I see a horse without a rider, I think, he's on his way to find his cowboy. When I did a confirmation class last year, I introduced our confirmation class to a philosophical theologian named Peter Rollins, who actually came and spoke at the neighborhood church. We brought some of our youth up to hear him, and he's coined this phrase that's running around the theological world. It is, to believe is human, to doubt is divine. To believe is human, and to doubt is divine. And what he would say in his very Irish accent, which I cannot mimic, is, I can put on a fancy suit, I can get my hair all done, I can whiten my teeth, I can look really official, and I can get you to believe anything. It's not hard to get someone to believe something. He says, but to get someone to doubt is very difficult. And to get someone to question their assumptions is almost impossible. Because we are a society of certainty, aren't we? We're certain about things that we don't even know about. There was a quote on one of the Jon Stewart shows, and it went something like this. The amount of certainty and anger one gets as a politician in D.C. is in direct proportion to how certain they are. And they're not certain. They're not certain. And I think it's interesting. How often do we ask questions as the older we get that we really, truly don't know the answer to? It's rare. Especially when we ask, kids questions. I find when I babysit my nieces, I'm asking them questions to see if they know something. And have you ever been around kids and they get kind of tired of it? Could you stop quizzing me? I don't know, I don't care. We rarely ask questions that we don't know the answer to. And think about it again in politics. It seems to me the cardinal sin is to be caught off guard, isn't it? That you need to know the answer. And if you don't know the answer to the direct question, I find that you steer the conversation into a prepackaged answer that sounds really good. Is it just me that notices that? Because we are in the age, if you haven't realized it, of information. We're sort of coming out of the age of information, actually, but we are in the age of information. And unfortunately, I think some of modern Christianity has taken on and succumbed to that great temptation, the pressure to anticipate the question and know for sure the answer. In fact, much of my formative teenage years in the 80s and 90s were spent reading books, The Case for Christ, like I was a lawyer, and I had to read up on this thing and have all the answers. And it's okay to have books like that. It's wonderful to have books for people who have thought through some of the answers. But for me, I found that the more certain I needed to be, the less certain I felt. The more I was boxed in to what the answer would be, the less I trusted that answer, because it didn't seem sincere. It boxed me in. And the truth is that the life of faith is not about being boxed in, right? It's about being on a journey. I am not searching for a box. I am searching for meaning and purpose. I am searching out a God who loves me so deeply that he sent his son to the cross. That is what I'm looking for. And what is my response to that? In faith. And it seems to me that when you look at it that way, there aren't any easy answers, are there? There aren't any boxes. Because faith is predicated on the idea that you aren't always certain, right? Have you ever heard the phrase, take something on faith? Just take it on faith, right? And when someone says that, what are they asking? For your trust. For your trust. Just take it on faith. This is what's happening. Just trust me. And so trust and faith and certainty are predicated on being trustworthy. Now we have in John 20, 19 through 31, read by Ron so eloquently, we have the story of the post-resurrection disciples. They're in a house and the doors are locked. Now we know the doors are locked, probably because they're on the most wanted list. I kind of always felt like if there was one of those FBI most wanted lists, those TV shows. You ever seen Most Wanted? I used to watch it. I don't watch it anymore because it freaks me out, because then I look at, every time I go to the grocery store, I'm like, is that one of them? That guy looks suspicious. Yeah. So did she kidnap that child? Does it look like hers? Yeah. So I try not to because it makes me paranoid. But I think that the disciples, it's fair to say, would have been on that show. They're afraid. Their leader is dead. Their hopes and dreams have died with him. It's celebration all around them for its festival of the unleavened bread. They're in Jerusalem. It's still Passover, remember? They're hearing rumors from some women at a tomb. They're not sure if they should believe it. I mean, at this point, they're still sort of a ragtag group of heretics, my kind of people. They're on the losing side of history. They've been expertly outflanked by the leadership of the religious elite and the entire Roman Empire. Yet, they still come together to meet, to figure it all out, to figure out the answers that they don't know from the questions they haven't asked yet. And there are no easy answers, are there? Their leader has been publicly humiliated and executed most brutally. And they're not sure what to do. All of their hopes and dreams have been dashed. However, this sounds glum, but it's the week after Easter. And last week, at least at the sunrise service at 6:30 a.m., for those of you who got up then to the beach, we proclaimed, he is risen. So we know that the story ends really well. But at this point, the disciples aren't sure. But Jesus enters in, as was read. And what's the first thing he says? Peace be with you. Because he knew they'd be afraid. He says, peace be with you. He doesn't say, what are you doing behind this locked door? He doesn't say, where were you? He says, peace be with you. Shalom. Shalom be with you. And we know that Thomas was not there. We don't know why he wasn't there. Some people want to say he's a coward, but if you read John 11:16, you know that he was no coward. For when all of the disciples are discussing the death of Lazarus, and if they should go back to the place where he died, you know that story where Lazarus dies and he's raised later, but there's a delay and they don't go. Well, it's because they're on the wanted list in that town. They could have been stoned if they'd gone back. And so they're all making excuses going, oh, Jesus, we don't need to go back. He's already dead. And Thomas, in this story in John, says, let us all go that we may die with him. So Thomas is no coward. So why does John alone include the story of the infamous doubting Thomas. Remember, this gospel is written down perhaps 70 years after the death of Christ. Why now? Why is this story included in John's gospel? Maybe because that kind of doubt that says, did Jesus really do what he said, has crept back up. Does anyone know what was happening 70 years after? The Roman Empire was still in control. They were having difficulties. Christianity was still under attack. And I bet at that point people were saying, did this Jesus thing really happen? I'm not so sure. They needed to hear the story of Thomas, and I believe that we need to hear it as well. Because there are two temptations in our modern society with the story of Thomas that we could fall into, the traps. Number one is the temptation we have as Christians to have faith without doubt. In this camp, Thomas is called Doubting Thomas, right? I Googled Doubting Thomas. Check with your grandchild if you don't know what Google means. And most of the sermons I saw were, don't be like Doubting Thomas, right? He's what we should be what should be avoided. And there's a sense where they jump straight to the proclamation. Just say Jesus is Lord. We don't need to go through all this difficult doubt stuff. Let's just get straight to the point. Let's rush to Jesus is Lord. We don't need all this doubting. Doubting is the opposite of faith, they say. And the second temptation we have as Christians in a modern world is to have doubt without faith. In this camp, Thomas is a hero. He's held up because he questioned Jesus. Thomas doesn't have faith, he has facts. We want to make everything an intellectual diatribe, and we are very certain. You can show your mental chops in this camp, but not your spiritual endeavors. They question on an intellectual level, but they never experience transcendence. They never experience transcendence. And they forget the ending of the story is Thomas proclaiming, my Lord and my God. And I think the reason we need to hear the story of Doubting Thomas is because Thomas shows us a third way. Faith with doubt. That faith and doubt are not mutually exclusive, but they're actually linked together in what I call the divine dance of doubt. Faith takes a few turns on the dance floor and asks doubt to join in. And asks doubt to join in because it makes the dance richer in our lives. It makes our faith fuller. It makes us better. Now think about it. Jesus was raised in a tradition of questioning and doubting. He was a rabbi. I think we can probably, if we know rabbis, ask them this question, that they know very well that in rabbinic education, the focus is not always on the answers, but it's on the questions. Questions that take you deeper and deeper and deeper into your own understanding of God and your faith. They don't transfer information. A lot of our age of information education, at least when I was a teacher, a lot of it is just transferring information, right? I'm going to give you a lecture. Here are the notes you take. I will quiz you on those notes. But our faith really shouldn't be like that. Because I believe that doubt is the doorway to a deeper faith. Think about how Jesus responded to questions. How did he often respond to questions?